There's continued volatility in the market, but the news for the Hedera ecosystem this week was absolutely jaw-dropping. We have a nation state that's getting involved. The TradFi space is building the canals for a flood of liquidity to enter the crypto space, and I have a couple interviews for you. One is on ag finance, and the other one is on AI that I think is going to blow your mind. Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, here once again to bring you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem, but as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So you may have seen a few posts about a nation that chose Hedera, an entire country, and it's actually not an exaggeration. The Ministry of Justice of Georgia has signed a letter of understanding with Hedera to introduce the tech into their public sector. Hedera representatives met with the Minister of Justice from the country located on the Black Sea in the Caucasus. They discussed transferring data of the National Agency of the Public Registry onto the Hedera network to ensure greater protection of property rights, transparency, and increased reliability of processes. And initially, they're focusing on real estate. Last week, we covered SentX tokenizing an energy fund with Magnus, and it's not the first time we've heard about RWA tokenization with SentX. Partnering with StegX, SentX tokenized real estate this past spring, and now bringing it back to the collaboration with Georgia, it looks like StegX is involved with the Georgia tokenization as well. And we know this because the founder of StegX posted some details on LinkedIn where he said, Georgia is moving its entire property market onto blockchain. The country just became the largest real estate tokenization use case on Earth. We're starting with what will become the largest real-world tokenization project of 2025. It's not a property, it's not a district. The National Land Registry of Georgia will run on Hedera. Together with the Ministry of Justice, the National Digital Transformation Task Force, and Hedera, we're building a new digital foundation for the country, a system where ownership, identity, and transfer no longer depends on paper, stamps, or physical presence. Georgia is becoming one of the first countries in the world where real estate can be verified, transacted, and financed entirely digitally with the help of DLT. This is not just a technology upgrade, it's a new economic infrastructure. Once land registry becomes digital, secure, and programmable, something powerful happens. Cross-border capital can finally flow without friction. Global investors can access an entire national real estate market transparently. Developers in Georgia can raise capital faster and more efficiently, and the government gains a system that's tamper-proof and future-proof. This is what happens when a country moves from legacy paperwork to digital rails for its most important asset class, real estate. And this is only the beginning. Land registry is the foundation, but it connects naturally to permitting, mortgages, notarization, identity, and broader public services. Georgia is building the blueprint for how nations modernize their real estate market and unlock global liquidity. So this doesn't sound exploratory at all. It sounds like Georgia has made up its mind and is dedicated to moving forward on this. And this is one of those lighthouse use cases where we show the rest of the world what's possible when you build on top of Hedera. I'm certainly excited about it. I'm sure the rest of the HBARbarians are as well. And I'm excited to see how this develops in the months and years to come. So the next thing I'm going to get into, of course, real estate is really important, RWAs in general, but another place where Hedera is focusing is AI, and I have a great interview for you. It's a pretty long one, so we're going to break it up into two parts, but let's get into it. So this week we have Ty Smith. He is an OG in the space. He's the founder of Hashgraph, and he's also the senior project manager over there at Hashgraph. Ty, welcome back, buddy.
Hey, how's it going? It's been a minute.
It has been. It's been a long time since we've had you on, which is a shame because you're doing some fantastic work across the space, but I don't exactly know what we're going to be getting into today because I saw a post where you said you did pretty much the craziest transaction you could imagine on the Hedera network, and I just want to dive into it and find out what you're doing.
Yeah. I think it's like story time where about a year ago, maybe even like a year and a couple months, I was just late night and I was on the test net and I was messing with something that I hoped would work, and it did. And the fact that it worked, and then it continued to kind of validate this thesis I've had for how effective Hedera can be in interoperability and in bringing like an extreme amount of flexibility to the new agentic world that's coming. I got initial validation that day, and then since then, there's just been an immense amount of work to solidify an easy, great developer experience around the conceptualization of how do you engage this vertical that is very unique to Hedera.
Well, tell us about it. Take us through what that initial transaction was, and what the vision is.
Yeah. So the core thesis is that the intention changes of how users and agents interact with Hedera. So when you assume agents, wallets, cross-chain systems want seamless interoperability, there's something really special about Hedera's account model that we really don't talk about a lot. The way that the keys work on the network, where it allows you to both have an ED25519 key or an ECDSA key, is pretty unique. And I think that's, just saying that eyes glaze over a little bit because people are like, okay, well, those are just a bunch of letters and numbers. What does that even mean? So it's much more about native interoperability with key types that wallets expect across networks. So an ED25519 key is also used on Solana. An ECDSA key is used on Base and Polygon and EVM networks. And the ability to support both have a really high value add, I think, to the rest of the networks. So the test that I was running was Bitcoin is an ECDSA network. It's obfuscated. So the way that Ethereum works, and I apologize for how nerdy and deep this goes, but this is, this was the transaction, right? It wasn't on the top level. So Bitcoin does use ECDSA keys, but they have things, they have offshoots like Taproot that change the public keys, and the public keys aren't like EVM. On EVM, you have a private key that is what you use to sign, and it has a signifier of the public key that can be verified of your signature. So if I sign something, that signature now has a public key on it that someone can go, oh yeah, I know that public key is account 123. I know account 123 signed that because, that's it. I'm sorry, I'm trying to do an EVM thing and I'm just so stuck in Hedera. But if on EVM, if your public address is how people see you, instead of 0.0. It's the public key of your private key. And that's how the whole EVM works. And so in order to support EVM, we had to support ECDSA keys. Hedera first had ED25519 keys and then added support. Why does any of this matter? So if you take a raw ECDSA key from the Bitcoin network, and this is what the transaction was, and send an HBAR to the public key of that ECDSA key, that key is now valid on the Bitcoin network to sign transactions that can execute on the Hedera network.
Okay. And from a practical standpoint, what does that mean?
So it was a proof of concept, and that's why I waited an entire year before setting up this interview. The proof of concept was if an agent has a key that's raw, which a lot of agents do, you don't usually give them like a browser wallet that they're going to use to sign. You just give them the private key and their environment variables so that they can do signatures. So if an agent has a raw ECDSA key from Bitcoin, it's very low friction for it to actually execute value on the Hedera network with the same key. And that's the most important thing. The developer experience, like adopting a new network, what's the hardest thing? Setting up a new account, getting a new seed phrase, remembering where that seed phrase is, setting up a ledger, like all of this crazy stuff. And so what Hedera's network does, because it's EVM compatible, is it has this way of you send HBAR to a public key of an EVM address, and then that private key will work. So if I'm in MetaMask, I can use my MetaMask key to execute transactions on the Hedera network. And the accidental innovation that came from that is that also works with Bitcoin. That also works with any ECDSA key. So if you have an UBI key that is your fingerprint, and and you touch it, an UBI key is like a security device that's you can put into any computer, and sort of like a ledger, but for anything, like a pass key, if you've heard of those things, to sign into stuff. And if that signs in the correct ECDSA format, you could use that as the public key, and the key could actually be on the UBI key. It's almost exactly like how a ledger works. It's this aha moment of the friction for anyone to adopt Hedera is so unbelievably low because they don't need to make a new key. There is caveats all over that. But in broad strokes, like if the other coolest thing that's really not known on the network is that we do the same thing with ED25519 keys. And so if you send an HBAR to 0.0. And the public key of an ED25519 key, that also creates an account on Hedera. And so you could have a Solana wallet that just has the Solana key, And you could send one HBAR to the pub key of that Solana key, and now they can do transactions and have, we were calling them shadow accounts, profile accounts, but have an account on Hedera that when they get signatures, they sign, and then that gets hashed in SHA-384, which is what Hedera is, and then that can execute transactions from that key.
Can you give us an example, Ty, of how a developer would use this in a real world use case? And I'm sure you've gone down those rabbit holes of, this could be used for X, Y, and Z. Give us your top example.
This is a very unique value add, and I'm going to go through all of the things that we've built since then to add to that value, and then I'll go through examples of how powerful this could be.
Okay.
So Solana keys, base keys, they can have shadow accounts on Hedera. That's sort of the overarching idea. So what's unique is on Hedera, you can also have multiple accounts with the same key. And that's if it's an EVM network, that's really not a possible thing. And if you've been following Hashgraph Online, new standards have been coming out that allow an ability to follow a path to create these things that we're calling profile accounts or petal accounts. If I have an account, I have all of my assets in one wallet. And on Hedera, we have a memo field. Hashgraph Online has also created something called HCS11, where in that memo field, you point to a JSON file that says, this is my image, this is my name, this is how you talk to me. And so it's given accounts. Like Hashgraph Online's hope is that you create this on-chain internet. And so accounts are like, if I go to Facebook, if I go to Google, if I go to these websites, you don't have one account for everything. That's absurd. And so profile accounts on Hedera, you can take the same key and create a new account that has a subset of assets that still requires the same signatures. You don't have to create anything new, but also has a new account memo. And so you can point it to a different profile. And so you can have a profile account or a petal account that isolates your interaction with one specific dApp or one section of dApps, then isolates your assets. So if it's like an NFT and you want to just go into your NFT world over there and have a different account, that's based in that. So that was one of the foundational blocks we built at Hashgraph Online to sort of unlock this idea of these keys can be any keys. The second was, I was talking about threshold keys earlier. How do you orchestrate different parties into a sort of AppNet on chain? And so that's what HCS 16 is, which is Flora accounts or AppNet accounts. And it just has a standard of how you would discover another account that maybe you want to do and transact trustlessly with, how to create the Flora account, which has a threshold key, 2 of 2, or whatever you agree on of the two petal accounts. And now you can put assets in there and you can make sure that it requires both signatures. And so you have this decentralized coordination layer of both identity. And again, identity not just for Hedera accounts, but any account on any network that has a ECDSA or ED25519 key can create these petal accounts on Hedera. And then those petal accounts can find each other and start coordinating in AppNet or execution. They could be ASIC miners. Like I don't care what you're doing, but the computers can find each other. They can create an account that they know they have verifiable trust that only if everyone agrees to the transaction will those assets be moved in a decentralized technology. Sorry.
No. I was going to say, in my head, of course, we go back to businesses using this, or individuals, but this feels like it's going to be really powerful, specifically for those agentic applications that we're going to be seeing coming to the Hedera network.
Yeah, to me, the future is ephemeral agentic app nets. And so luckily, Hedera is built for the future. And 7 years ago, Lehman's, big brain and ideas are just coming to fruition to the world on how powerful is. The last thing that we built at Hashgraph Online, HOL.org, is HCS 17, which also says how you can create state hashing of the AppNet states in that AppNet. So each petal account can come to a state both on-chain and off-chain. Say you want to make a prediction market, and the prediction market needs to know, I haven't watched golf since the 90s, so I apologize for the old reference. Did Tiger Woods win? Was it how under par was Tiger Woods? And so each of the petal accounts both have state of what topic IDs do they have that they're watching and that they write to, and the REST API call of PGA Tour that will get them the valid par for Tiger Woods' score. And all of them do that. And then all of them check each other's hashes of any external source in this data hashing. And they all can come to consensus and say, yeah, we all agree that it was 4 under par. And so then that can be written to a topic ID or a smart contract, even if you wanted, after they all sign that transaction, anything. And then that will then, execute the prediction market. So you can make ephemeral oracles that have state hashing on network using topic IDs for linear provenance of all of the data hashes. Easy, one unique identifier. Here's all of my information. And all of this is just extremely unique and required, from my point of view, for the future of computing. And we're just sitting here with it.
Now, Patches is an absolute superstar in the Hedera space, and he has a lot more for you in part 2 of that interview, which we're going to be showing here in a little bit. Stick around for it because he gets into his vision for Hedera and AI, which is really interesting. But in the meantime, I do want to get into an area where we just seem to continually get news, and that's in HBAR ETFs. First, I'm going to go into Canary Capital, the issuer of the first HBAR-backed ETF, HBR. They amended their S1 for another ETF that's going to include our native asset. This one covers American-made crypto platforms, a category that became popular with the current administration vowing to make the United States the crypto capital of the world and throwing around ideas like homegrown platform tokens not having to pay capital gains taxes. Now, that hasn't come to fruition, but I think we are seeing a really good environment that could benefit these American-made tokens. And now for the broken record. With HBAR being included in leading crypto indexes like the Coinbase 50 and the CoinDesk 20, and fitting nicely in categories like Layer 1s, Made in America, and RWA platforms, HBAR is in the perfect spot to be part of the basketed ETF revolution. And I don't think calling this a revolution is an overstatement. I think this is exactly what the early majority of investors need to get involved in the crypto space, and it benefits a sweet spot, like we've been talking about, of tokens. It's not Bitcoin, because Bitcoin, even though it's included in these basketed ETF, its weighting is reduced relative to its market cap. It's all of the other tokens that are in those basketed ETFs but aren't named Bitcoin, and of course the ones that aren't included that go beyond the Coinbase 50 or beyond the CoinDesk 20. It's the ones that are in that sweet spot that are going to have the most benefit from it. Plus, once these ETFs start to become available, you're going to have all of these investment firms and their sales teams pushing these assets. And a perfect example of that is what we saw come out of Bank of America this week. They suggested an allocation of 1% to 4% crypto exposure for all of their clients. And the vast majority of those clients aren't even close. And like we've said over and over, they aren't going to try to pick winners. They're going to take one of these basketed ETFs and just blindly put money into it. Now, as they start to get skin in the game, they are going to get more interested in it, and they're going to start to look at all these different tokens, and that's where I think HBAR is going to start to stand out. They're going to look at the council, they're going to take a look at these use cases, they're going to take a look at the utility and the vision, and that's really going to resonate with this early majority, a lot of which are going to be Generation X and boomers who happen to have a lot of money. And what Hedera has built to this point, its professionalism and its grand vision for the future, is really going to have an impact. And heck, then they might start looking at HBR to get some direct exposure for those that haven't been able to get exposure in the spot markets and centralized exchanges. And speaking of HBR, it also looks like 50 million people are likely to gain access to the spot HBAR ETF in the near future. Vanguard is pretty much the largest brokerage, depending on which metric you use, with 50 million customers and well over $10 trillion worth of assets under management. I've seen numbers as high as 11 or even higher. And these numbers vary depending on the source, so if you've seen some different numbers out there, that's all right. But suffice to say, Vanguard is big. Now, as has generally been the case, about a year ago, they were adamant that they would not give clients access to crypto ETFs, trying to stay on the conservative side of things. Well, that changed in a big way this week. I think they realized that they were shooting themselves in the foot watching BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF become their biggest moneymaker. And this week, they dropped a bombshell, pulling a 180. They're starting to allow clients to buy these crypto ETFs. Now, I attempted to buy some HBR to test this out, but it still looks like it's unavailable, at least it is for me. That said, the issuer of the ETF, Canary Capital, posted that it was available, so my guess is it's not going to be too long. Now, when I saw that I didn't have access, I actually called Vanguard customer service to see if there was something else I could do to get access. They said that it wasn't available right now, but they're continuing to evaluate these different ETFs. I do want to say that if there are any other Vanguard customers out there, give a call to customer service. Let them know that there is demand for the HBR asset so they get it listed on there as soon as they possibly can. And if anybody has had success buying the HBR ETF on Vanguard, please let me know down there in the comments. Now, this post may be automated, but I'm not surprised the account has nearly 500,000 followers. It said, HBAR is one of only 5 altcoins Vanguard's 50 million clients can buy starting today. Not 500 altcoins, 5. When $11 trillion in boomer retirement accounts gets crypto access, but the menu is Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, XRP, and HBAR, concentration of flows becomes a mathematical certainty. And just to give an update on the spot ETF, we saw an additional 12 million HBAR in inflows this week, bringing the total to 459 million HBAR held by Canary. Next up, last week we reported that HBAR had been added back into the Coinbase 50, but it was buried in some Coinbase paperwork, and we would be much happier if there was some clearer signs. That's what we got this week with a post directly from the crypto giant itself. So it is official. We are back in the Coinbase 50. And coming full circle here, highlighting why it makes sense for Canary Capital to single out American cryptos in an ETF, the environment that continues to get cultivated by the administration, by regulators, agencies to make the United States the crypto capital of the world, it just continues. And that's exemplified here by a comment from the SEC chairman himself.
I'm looking forward to having an innovation exemption that we've been talking about now. We'll be able to get that out in a month or so is what I'm hoping. We were impeded a bit by the government shutdown. Obviously, we couldn't work on things during that time, but we're on track and we will be able to forge forward with the crypto area and make sure that we are able to embrace this new area of innovation that for too long the United States basically is just pushed back against. And so I'm looking forward to having rules that are focused on helping that sector of the economy move forward.
And now shifting gears here, we're going to get into that interview around ag finance from somebody that has been looking at Hedera for a really long time. Today, we're happy to have Sophie. She is the founder and CIO of hiveonline. Sophie, thank you so much for hopping on today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to the conversation. To start off, what exactly is hiveonline solving for? What is the problem?
So the problem we're solving is that in Africa and in many countries in the developing world, but we focus on Africa, small farmers don't generally have access to digital solutions that can help them to build a profile. Most of their transactions are done in cash. They often trade goods for goods rather than for cash. So they lack the ability to build a commercial and financial history, which means they can't access things like financial services, but also confidence from their buyers and sellers as well. So people trying to sell goods to them can't even see them.
That makes perfect sense. And how exactly is hiveonline solving that problem?
Well, we create a digital profile for these farmers by providing them with a digital tool that helps them to manage their commercial transactions. And as they manage their commercial transactions over that tool, they build this digital profile. So primarily, as far as our farmers are concerned, we're a marketplace. We're a way to sell their crops. We're a way to get lending. We're a way to buy products from agricultural dealers. But from our perspective and from the bank's perspective, we're building them a credit history.
That makes a lot of sense. And I've heard this over and over again from different players in the space. You think that they're actually focused on one thing. And in this case, it's the marketplace, but it's actually about data provenance and tracking. And we see that in our regenerative finance space. We see it in our DeFi space as well. So that's exactly what you're doing here. It's more about, or as much about, the data as the other products that you're providing, right?
Totally. I mean, we see ourselves. I mean, I'm an infrastructure person. I used to build big shiny boxes for banks. We see ourselves as infrastructure and data, but our customers see us as a marketplace. So two very different sides of the coin.
Sure. So Now I'm curious as to why you chose Hedera. What were the features and things that drew you to the network?
So for us, we've been on the Stellar network for a long time. We originally chose that because of the low cost, but it's been unpredictable. Gas prices are hugely volatile, but mostly for us, it was price predictability, but also the volume of transactions that we have going through the platform. So we were looking for a platform which has got not infinite, but a high expansion possibility. We love the transaction throughput, and we love the predictable pricing because obviously our customers are very poor. We can't pass on higher costs to them, and in order to be a profitable business, we need to have very predictable and low costing. So that was one of the main factors that drew us to Hedera. Also, as a geek, I just think the maths behind it is very elegant, but that's a side comment.
Oh no, that's something that we all kind of fell in love with the tech as well, and the math behind it. And but I am curious because you mentioned that you needed that throughput. What kind of scale are we talking about with your platform, and what's your vision for expansion?
Well, we currently only have 75,000 farmers on the platform, so we're just starting out from a growth perspective. But if you look at
Did you say
Africa,
75,000?
yes.
Oh,
But
pretty impressive already.
if you look at Africa as a continent, there are somewhere between 400,000 and 700,000 smallhold. Sorry, 400 million and 700 million smallholders on the continent. Globally, we don't know how many, but there are huge numbers of smallholders all over the continent, which at the moment, very few of them have access to financial services. In Mozambique, which is one of our key countries, when we did our survey 4 years ago, less than 0.6% of all smallholder farmers had any access to financial services. And, there's 4 million, maybe 3 or 4 million smallholders in Mozambique, and that's just one country. So the market is huge. The potential is huge. Sky's the limit.
And specifically around the transactions that you're pushing. Now, Stellar is a capable network, maybe not as capable as Hedera, but to get to the point where you were hitting your limits, you must have been pushing a fair amount of transactions. As far as just the raw transactions, how many do you think you'll be processing?
Well, we're looking at probably a couple of million transactions a year by the end of next year. So that may not sound huge, but we're still growing our market, obviously. One of our key problems, though, is that because of a lot of our customers don't have access to the internet or even phone signal, our platform also works significantly offline, and we have a queuing system that sends all of the transactions in order to the blockchain when connection is achieved. And clearly that creates gluts in transaction volume, which was causing a lot of problems with Stellar and would with any other network, I think, other than Hedera, which obviously has this very high volume opportunity.
The next thing I want to touch on is your customers themselves. One of the promises of DLT is unlocking the economic potential of literally billions of people around the world. And it's not just great for them, but it's great for all of us because that increased productive capacity is good for the entire world economy. Can you tell us a little bit more about your customers and the potential you think they have?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, Africa in general and Mozambique in particular are areas with huge potential for agricultural expansion. Your average farmer there probably is living on less than $2, often less than $1 a day. They have a farm of approximately an acre, maybe less. So they're multi-crop farmers, often with one or maybe two commercial value chains, but mostly subsistence farmers. But the land, the opportunity for increased production is huge. If they had access to the right things, then that means agricultural inputs and money. So, from a fundamental perspective, they are a huge growth opportunity. We estimate that any farmer could be producing up to 8 times as much crops as they are today. But then from a commodities perspective and from a blockchain perspective, as I mentioned, they often trade things such as crops rather than money. So you might get somebody selling milk for seeds, we've seen, or lending in seeds and getting in paid back in goods. And obviously, this is a case that's just tailor-made for blockchain. It's tailor-made for tokenization, and it allows us to create a commercial history from things that aren't necessarily money. From a community perspective, we see the communities of farmers as almost like a DAO, because they're each these small trust-based groups of farmers who collaborate, who have collective stake in helping each other and trust each other. We help to extend that trust into the wider community and beyond these communities, but really helping them to become part of an active ecosystem, an economic ecosystem, just like a DAO, but without the formal financial structure that we traditionally associate with, high finance and banking.
Sophie, when you brought up the size of the farms, that these are smaller farms, it made me think about, the Industrial Revolution and, the mechanization revolution when it came to agriculture in general. And what I'm thinking about here is how you could see consolidate. You could see the same kind of thing that we saw in the mechanization revolution in agriculture. You see the consolidation of farms that frees up a lot more people to go do other things. When we had the United States in the 1800s, you saw 90% of the people were involved in agriculture. What I could see here is them moving on to other things. And since you've already provided a solution for them in one place, you could have other opportunities in the economy as it grows.
Absolutely. And we're already beginning to support small commercial enterprises. I mentioned agro dealers, they're a big part of it. Where I see this going is as these communities get richer, obviously, as you say, there's more opportunities for aggregation and diversification. And my goal is to see communities with good education, good healthcare, good commercial opportunities, good leisure opportunities in each community rather than just surviving, which is what they're doing at the moment. And of course, as more money pours into these communities, it enables the growth of those activities. And one of the challenges we see, and you mentioned people leaving the smaller communities for the big communities in Africa, as with the Industrial Revolution, is that people, especially younger people, are leaving these communities because there are no opportunities there. What we'd actually like to see is more people staying in those communities because the opportunities are there. So it's really not taking away from the cities, but growing outside the cities as more communities become more prosperous. That's where we'd like to see this go.
It's a beautiful vision. Sophie, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to cover?
Well, the future state of where we're going. We've built this commercial ecosystem for the communities that we support. We would like to grow it up to the next level, which is moving into capital markets in the next year. So we are planning to release our own stablecoin, first in Mozambique and then in other places. And then off the top of that, we want to start trading commodities, both internally within these countries and externally based on tokenized assets. That's the next phase of our build, and I'm really looking forward to that, coming from the banking world and being a bit of a geek, moving into that side of things.
Well, there's a lot of really cool stuff to geek out on when it comes to Hedera and the possibilities around it. But best of luck on everything that you're working on. Thank you for building on Hedera, and thanks for coming on today and telling us all about hiveonline.
Thanks very much. It's been a great pleasure.
And a really cool fact about Sophie, along with Rob Allen, our very own Sharky Rob, she wrote the very first book that mentioned Hedera. It was called FinTech Revolution, Universal Inclusion in the New Financial Ecosystem. It was written way back in 2018. And from everything that's being done at hiveonline, it looks like she's doing everything she can to bring this to reality. And sticking with Africa, there's a new Kenyan shilling stablecoin that's being introduced by a new player called NHX Finance, which is being born from the Nairobi Securities Exchange Innovation Lab that we reported on a few weeks ago. Of course, this makes complete sense since they're pushing towards a fully tokenized sister exchange called the Kenyan Digital Exchange. They'll need that stablecoin as the numeraire and the bedrock for trading all the other assets on the exchange. So the building blocks are being put in place for the first major TradFi exchange to be built on a crypto platform, and it just happens to be right here on Hedera. And now let's dive into part 2 of that deep dive into Hedera's AI landscape with patches. I mean, these are the kind of things that I think a lot of people, myself included, don't really understand around the capabilities for Hedera and AI. I think of it at the surface level that Hedera is perfect for agent-to-agent, user-to-agent commerce because of the low fees, the predictable fees. We are starting to build up better liquidity. And I think HBAR is actually one of the best things to actually do that because it's 1/10 of the cost of, any other token that is minted on Hedera. But You're obviously very passionate about this. You put a lot of brain power into thinking about this. What is your broad vision for Hedera and how it fits into the AI future that we're coming into?
Yeah. So I have a really fun answer for this one, and I'm in this interview. I'm really wearing my Hashgraph Online hat, a community hat.
Sure.
So what we've been working on at HOL.org is, I think it's extremely groundbreaking, and I think Michael Cantor is a beast and just creates so much so fast. It's hard for people to understand
Absolutely.
what's been built. So today, the Hashgraph Online registry brokers index all of the AI agent registries that exist. So X402 is a payment standard created by Coinbase, and it's on the Base network. And there's something called X402 Bazaar, which has all of these registered agents that can take those payments. That's indexed. There's something called Agent First with Fetch AI. That's indexed. There's something called MCP Pulse that has a bunch of MCP servers, I think 5,000 or 6,000 MCP servers. That's indexed. There's something called A to A, which is agent to agent, Google's standard for how to communicate agent to agent. That's indexed. There's something called ERC 8004, which almost went live, but then it got delayed a little bit to mid-December. That's indexed. And so all of these agents on dispersed networks, everyone has their own standard on how they are documenting verification, trust, reputation. And the Hashgraph Online registry broker is utilizing Hedera as the glue between all agents registered in all networks in any standard, and it allows you today to utilize the API to do elastic search. So you can search for a medical agent that knows HIPAA compliance laws. You can search for any number of niche things, and it will return in the elastic search, transversing all networks and all of the indexed agents. And then I didn't go into it, but I think one of the most important things that we've built at Hashgraph Online is HCS 14, which right now Michael's working with IEEE and Advanced AI Society to have this patchwork event of getting everyone who's creating agentic standards to come into one room and present. So like the creator of ERC 8004 is going to be doing a talk. I'll share a link with you. It's happening, I think, the 10th or the 9th. I should know that. But it's everyone getting in the room and consolidating standards. So HCS 14 is starting to be looked at and adopted by other players like NANDA, MIT, IEEE are looking at it as a possible standard for how do I know the identity of an agent. And so the beauty of HCS 14 is we don't care if it's a Web 2 agent or a Web 3 agent. If it has a DID, that it encapsulates that DID, and all of the information gets you to find that agent exactly where they are with a pub key that you know their signatures. So I can prove the transactions that this person's doing is that identity, or whoever has that key, right? Wildly important, but because we have a solution in production on how to have agentic identities across all of these different networks, we also have on the Hashgraph Online registry broker an ability to discover, to chat. And so if one agent talks through A to A and one agent talks through HCS 10, the HOL broker will just do it. And so it's this glue that's just like, I don't care where you are. I don't care what registry you're in. I don't care what standard you use to communicate. If you utilize the Hashgraph Online registry and the API, you can just find an agent, talk to them, exchange value without having to know what network they're on and without having to buy their native token. All of that is obfuscated. And you can use X402 payments on Base to buy credits for the registry broker. So you don't have to buy HBAR, you don't have to get USDC. It's just whatever network you're on, if you're an agent, you can use X402 to buy credits, to then find other agents, to then do chats, or then we're going to have encrypted chats soon. And then you can transact value. And if that value is creating an AppNet of having 4 different agents do orchestrated work, and then needing to prove that work and execute an escrow where they all agree and then distribute funds, all of that can happen using all of the previous things I talked about with like Flora accounts and profile accounts, obfuscated from any of these agents needing to know about any of it, only getting that underlying value of security and trust. And they can investigate if they want to know how it's working, but they don't need to. It just lightning speed, discovery, execution of orchestrated swarm work, and then value on any network on Web 2 or Web 3. And that's live today.
Now, it sounds like, Tyler, that we're at the cutting edge of what's possible with interoperability. We know that interoperability is going to be really important. We hear that preached by a lot of smart people. There has been areas where Hedera has followed as well, though. Of course, DeFi and NFTs and meme coins and all that kind of stuff. But there are some areas where it does seem like we're leading, and transactional Internet of Things is a good example of that, or everything that's happening around regenerative finance and carbon credits. It seems like Hedera's leading there. It does feel like AI is this place where not only would we really want to lead, but we are leading, with teams like Prove AI, Equity Lab, working with NVIDIA and Accenture, and on down the line. It feels like the infrastructure is being put in place as well, and that with people like you and Michael Cantor, that we really are leading in this area. Is that fair? Does it seem like Hedera is keeping up with the cutting edge when it comes to AI compared to the other networks out there?
I think we're doing a really good job so far, but we can't count our eggs. These chickens have not hatched. Yeah. So I think we have a good start, and we have an amazing community of smart people that are utilizing the undergrounding technology to build things, especially Equity Labs, I would say, is probably the number one. When you got to deal with NVIDIA, that's high. That's a high mark. But it's nothing certain. Nothing is in stone. And I think what we're seeing, agentic payments is definitely one of the main focuses with X402, AP2, which is Google's. And then we're seeing people like networks like Near Intense has done billions of dollars of agentic transactions cross-chain by utilizing Zcash as a privacy underlying thing. So agents can exchange value without their exchange being publicly seen is sort of their value add. So I would say, there's some places that we're not falling behind, but we're not leading, which would, like, agentic payment architecture, I think Near, to me, would probably be the leader, but it's all in front of us. So it's much more about discerning where the value lies and where's our product market fit for the Hedera and Hashgraph technology inside of this new agentic world. And I think payments is something that we need to focus a little bit more on and understand where's that niche, because our value add there is very high when it comes to quick, fast transactions, ability to sign transactions in different key types. We're doing it all right. We're definitely not at the back of the pack. I'd say we're a little bit front than the middle of the pack. Race ain't over, it just started. And we really need to cultivate a great agentic community. I don't know if you saw, Hedera Foundation funded Agent Hustle, which is an awesome DeFi agent. I'm actually long-term friends with them from the Ordinal space, and then they built the Agent Hustle in Solana. Now they support Hedera, which is awesome. And you can talk to your wallet. You can say, hey, this is when I want to sell my tokens, when I'm up 130% of this tokens, and then agent will do those transactions for you on Saucerswap, and you can do stop losses and stuff, which really didn't exist on Hedera before Agent Hustle, to do stop losses and talk to your wallet to have it to do transactions on the network. I love seeing the new developments from Hedera Foundation. I generally, it's like a breath of fresh air with all of this great innovation, especially in the agent space. And I have just a lot of hope for both the energy that we see in the community and the major changes that we've seen over the last 5 years of how our sister organizations are working together, where is our focus, and just what's the execution going forward to make sure, again, that we carve out a very fundamental part of this vertical and this new vertical in this agentic space that is, it's got to be all computing. Like, to me, all computers are changing to agentic computing, and there's so much value we can bring to that space. And I think we're doing an initially good job at it, and we really need to keep getting all of the troops running at this, because this is it. Tidal wave, we're paddling and the wave is cresting and we're right there, but we got to keep paddling to make sure that we catch it, and that we fundamentally help bring a better quality of life to people through faster ability to gain value, to transact value, to have private transactions so people don't, invade your privacy. You decide where your data goes. And I think Hedera and Hashgraph has a huge play in that.
Ty, well covered. I will say that I'm big on agentic payments. I think that you're exactly right. That's someplace we should be focusing. And I would love to see HBAR being a huge part of that. I'm the HBAR bull. I have to push the HBAR across the board, but it has a practical aspect as well, being so much cheaper than even the already cheap tokens on the Hedera network. Now, I do want to give you one more opportunity. We covered tons of stuff today, but is there anything else you'd like to touch on?
I would say just get involved. HOL or Hashgraph Online, it's meant to be an open source project. Everything's on GitHub. You can go look at it. A lot of teams are looking at how to tackle this next frontier, and just ask questions, get involved, use the Hedera community. It's one of the best in Web3, if not the best, and help each other grow. This is definitely a moment where the accelerant of Hedera helping Hedera help Hedera is going to allow all of the players inside of this ecosystem win in a way that's good for them, but most importantly, it's good for the infrastructure of the next stage of computing, which is what my eye is on, because there's a very easy way that we'll fall into the death trap of another internet 2.0. Like Cloudflare goes down and the internet's dead. We can fix that in a decentralized agentic internet. We just need to work towards that goal, and data provenance, data sovereignty, data attestations are the core to that.
Well, I love the energy that I'm getting. I'm super impressed with everything that's been done with Hashgraph Online. I appreciate you coming on here today and telling us everything about what you're working on. But the next time you come on, it has to be measured in weeks or months. It can't be years again.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. Definitely got to do this again real soon.
And now let's change gears again and get into Hedera NFTs. Now, last week we had Patricia on from SentX. And following up from that, I got a question on their native tokens tokenomics. Brandon Miranda said, "What up, Brandon? What do you think about the tokenomics for SentX? Just curious on your thoughts." So I gave myself a refresher on the SentX token, which goes by the same name as the platform itself, SentX, and the token incentivizes using the platform, essentially buying and selling NFTs on SentX. For every HBAR spent or earned on the platform, the buyer and seller both get 0.002 SentX tokens. There was never any ICO or INO when it comes to the token, which means 95% of the tokens will be distributed via that mechanism. Of the remaining 5%, 3% is dedicated to marketing and 2% to the team. If you've heard some of the volumes we've discussed from the Dead Pixels and other Forever Mints, SentX generates significant revenue, and 15% of those goes towards SentX token benefits. Half of that, or 7.5% of the total revenue, buys SentX from the open market, which is then burned, used to provide additional rewards for liquidity providers on Saucerswap or strengthen the SentX liquidity pools. The other 7.5% of revenue buys NFTs from the platform and puts them up for sale in the platform store, where you can buy top NFTs with SentX for up to 50% off. And finally, if you're curious, the max supply sits at 10 million tokens. There's 1 million that have already been put into circulation. And as the mechanisms above demand it, there will be more tokens that are issued into the market. And speaking of NFTs, I'm going to show my own NFTs, the Bullbarians. I have an absolute blast managing my community, giving early access, giving exclusive access in my Galaxy world. And speaking of Galaxy, it is an awesome platform for managing a community. So if you do have a community that is already Web3, or you're looking to add Web3 to it, it's a perfect place to start. I put up my content. I can pretty much put anything that I want in there. I have good dynamics, good conversations. And if you do want to get access in there, it is the best way to support the channel. Right now, we have a live mint going on Kabila. You can pick one up on there and transfer it to your Galaxy wallet. And from there, you'll easily be able to hop into my world and get access to all this early and exclusive content that I'm talking about. Finally, Karate Combat is having an event tonight, and reports are that the KC app is up, but I have to admit I'm a little bit bitter because my app doesn't seem to be functioning correctly. I haven't been able to make my fight picks yet. I will say that it is working for my wife, so if I can't get this all worked out, my last-ditch effort is going to be to delegate to her. But hopefully between now and then I can get it worked out. And there's no guarantee. There are some glitches, it seems like, with the app right now, so there's no guarantee that the delegation is going to work either. All right, with that, let's go ahead and jump into the HBAR market. Despite all the good news, the crypto gods didn't smile on us this week. Bitcoin is down 2.5% on the day and 1.5% on the week to just under 90 grand. And HBAR is down 3.5% on the day and 8% on the week to 13.4 cents. On the bright side, if we can bounce from here, it makes a series of higher lows, so that's a good technical indicator. If not, we should have some strong support down around 12 cents. So thinking about that Karate Combat event, unfortunately, delegating to my wife isn't going to work because they've already taken the snapshot. I know some other really big up-only gamers who have been doing this for a really long time who can't get access and pick their fighters either. So this is frustrating for sure. I'm going to talk to the Karate Combat team, even though they are really busy right now, to see if we can get some kind of a resolution around it. Looking forward to next week. I'm going to try to get Brady on Sunday to do another DeFi Corner. I have a team, C Sigma. You might have seen the blog on the Hedera Foundation website. I'm going to try to get them on for an interview. No shark bites next week, but I am working on a few other interviews. That's all we have for now. If you are new to the Hedera space and you want to learn about anything that we've talked about here, you can go to my channel and take a look at all of the Built on Hedera series, which tells you about all the things that are built on Hedera. But that's all we have for now. We'll see you next week.